Three, two,
Okay.
one. Okay, no. We are live. We are live already. Hey guys, what's up? Thank you for tuning into yet another episode of Culture Minus Sanskar Unscripted. We were calling it India Unscripted. We realized how stupid that is and how dumb the whole thing sounds because we already are called Culture Minus Sanskar. So why not just retain the name? So from now on, we rename it to Culture Minus Sanskar Unscripted, and this is episode number 5, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, 5.
My great friend, best friend, only friend, Sandeep, with me here. What's up, Sandeep? And we've been trying to figure out what to and what not to speak about because sometimes we really sort of go uh, all across the board and we don't know where exactly to land up. And we were like, okay, it'd be a good idea to have some sort of theme to this whole thing because a lot of friends have been actually, Sandeep, telling me that, hey guys, come on, man, you just cannot be so indulgent that you just keep talking about whatever the fuck you want. So maybe there is a theme to this. I don't know. But just before the start of this podcast, he and I were discussing about this influencer by the name the Wandering Kamya. Yeah. And how she sort of this is uh, half British, half Indian girl who broke down on Instagram about the Hinduphobia in India. And I think her idea of and she's like a spiritual wanderer, so to speak. That's why the wandering is not the physical wandering; it's more like the mental wandering,
Do we
right?
still call them hippies or
We don't call them hippies anymore. We call them
we call them?
influencers. Yeah, we call
Of
them travel vloggers. So
course.
So the wandering Kamya's shtick is that she goes to all these native land. I don't even know what native lands are, and she goes to talk to these indigenous people, and she'd go to Mexico, she'd go to Africa, and all those places, and talk about that particular culture. And when I say she talks about that particular culture, that means she poses half naked, with some beads in her hair and color on her eyes, and talks about the spiritual energy that sort of permeates the universe, or some shit like that. Whatever, man, I don't know. So she was crying about the other day about like the Hindu phobia in India, and sort of makes me think about how a lot of it makes me think about two things essentially, right? Like how Indianness sometimes gets defined by two sets of people. One is the diaspora, the people from the Indian diaspora from across the world, like especially the like the Western world, which is the Canadians, the Americans, the Australians not are not Western, but yeah, they
Yeah,
are
but you know
Western.
what
They are
we mean.
Western, yeah.
Yeah.
And the British, and like the Indians from these countries, they sort of really like to own up the culture for some reason. And then there is a second batch of people who are like the Westerners who have come to India, and they like to see India in their own light, right? Like all these wise journalists and isse pehle, like guys like Joseph Campbell and Sandeep was talking about Max Mueller. So we were like, okay, like it seems to us that the narratives present in the world about Indianness are actually coming from these two sources. And like, what the fuck, right? Because how could you just look at everything from that lens? Am I even making sense to you right now, Sandeep? Because Wandering Kamya's and you guys got to go check it out on Twitter. It's there somewhere. She took it down after that. But her breakdown was insane. She went all like, oh my god, people, you cannot just hate on Indians like that. Hinduphobia is real. It's real. And I was like, this is just funny to watch. I'm sure there is some
So there was an
Hinduphobia.
element of Hinduphobia amongst the Hindus also, right? In her breakdown.
I don't know how to define it, man. But I wasn't really listening. Also, actually, I was just like looking at. I was like, what the fuck? Shit, this looks so fake. So it just went pretty crazy. So yeah, and then the Twitter sort of erupted, and I'm not on Twitter, but I have this anonymous account which I just used to access these
Of
kind
course
of
you
things.
do.
Yeah, just for these kind of things, right? And I was like, fuck, man, like the Indian community sort of in USA and UK sort of goes crazy about these kind of things. And when I say the communities means, I mean like 20 or 30 influencers who sort of like to cater
They
to
bring their uh, they bring their tribes along.
they bring the tribes. So I was going to
There's
say
an
target
all
markets.
around,
Yes, I
of
was going to
course.
say that
Oh,
TG,
we
yeah, to sell to their people, right? So yeah, that's what I
hippies are
thought.
influencers
Yeah,
and the tribes are TGs now. Okay.
so that's how it
For
seems
people
to be.
who don't know
Yeah.
what TG is basically marketing lingo for target groups.
target groups are the people you speak to, right? So, for example, give me a good example of target groups, Sandeep. Like if
I
you're
don't know. I
Amit
mean,
Shah, you're talking to Mandir enthusiasts.
I'll just talk as a if I was making candy, if I was a manufacturer of candy,
Spoken like a
my target group would
marketer.
be kids. If I was Amit Shah, well, it would depend on the season.
If you're Michael Jackson, your target group would be kids too.
I, that's what I was wondering. Like, the minute I was like, am I walking into something here? It's so wrong nowadays to even reference kids, man. It's just, it's so
Yeah,
sad.
it is
But
crazy.
yeah, I guess if you're,
Uh,
why is this funny, man? This is not funny. This is anyway. So anyway, going back to wandering Kamya. So
so
tell me something. So she had a breakdown on Twitter, is it?
she had a breakdown on Instagram and she took the video down. And I
Why
think
why did she take the video down though?
because she got a lot of flack from real Indians who were like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
When you say real Indians, you mean Indians from the Janma Bhumi, Karma Bhumi of Bharat, is it?
Yes, I mean people from Ayodhya, people from Uttar Pradesh, people from
People from India, basically. Not
essentially.
the NRIs. NRIs would have lapped that shit up, right? I'm assuming.
Exactly. So that's what I wanted to come to. And it's a very interesting phenomenon for me, right?
Yeah.
Because NRIs seem to like take the shittiest and the most superficial Indian ideas, and the thing is they run with it. And not only do they run with it, I'm okay with them running with it. It's just completely fine by me. I mean, you do you, right? But then they make it commercial and they sell that shit. And they sell that shit as if it's like the true Indian shit there is. I know some people, I think, if I'm not mistaken, unless I'm horribly, horribly off the mark, and which I can be sometimes, but I saw this NRIs trying to say that you cannot wear t-shirts with gods on them. And you cannot wear all these beads and Hari Om wala bracelets and all because you're appropriating Indian culture. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Has anybody ever asked you that in India? It's like,
is that co-opting shit, is it?
yeah, some shit like that. Like cultural appropriation, right? Like you can, my
Cultural
culture is not
appropriation.
my culture is not
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah,
fashion,
yeah.
right? And
How
I'm like,
dare you cannot,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm like, balls. It is, of course, everybody's culture is everybody's fashion, right? Like, what are you talking
Dude,
about?
those Hindu gods on t-shirts look so cool, man.
They look
Especially on those
amazing.
white t-shirts. Like, it's just
I
weird.
I
So
saw a
trippy.
guy, I saw a guy with a Shivji ka t-shirt or like the blue t-shirt, and I was like,
Oh, yeah.
because it's awesome,
Yeah.
right? And how many of us,
It's awesome, man.
yeah, and how many of us have grown
I don't
Rudraksh
know
and
why.
all?
Yeah, Rudrakshas are so cool. I don't know why. I mean, I just think Hindu culture is kind of cool sometimes. I mean, Indian culture in general, like all the symbols, motifs, they're so rad. Like tantric Buddhist stuff is like crazy, dude. We have like people heads bursting in flames and shit, and they say, "Oh, he's enlightened." So that's why
Exactly.
his head is on fire. So it's so cool. It's like one of those things. But you know the thing
And
is,
nobody tells you in India that, right? That don't wear this and don't wear that. They're like,
yeah,
हाँ
nobody
ठीक है,
cares.
तुमको जो
No,
पहनने
nobody
का
gives a
पहनना,
shit here.
क्या फर्क पड़ता है?
हाँ, cool है,
So
bro. So hippie
exactly,
है.
exactly. तू हरे राम का
But
चोला पहन के जाएगा तो कोई कुछ बोलने वाला नहीं. But these
exactly. I
fuckers,
don't get.
they seem to be extra sensitive to these kind of things, and that's also
I don't know
because
why actually.
I
It's
think
kind
there
of
is a
strange.
reason for that.
Is that?
Yeah, it's
So you okay? So
monetization.
let's break it down. So she had to take down her post mainly because I think the Indians just like gave it to her basically.
Yeah, yeah,
She
yeah.
faced a lot of flack from Indians from India land. Okay, and the Indians from the rest of the world. They sort of bought into her in a way, and maybe the Westerners also were like, "Oh, there is something called as Hinduphobia. It's so sad," and stuff like that. Am I right? Is that what happened?
It's close to that. It's close to that. I think pretty much anybody with a bit of common sense saw that she was just bullshitting everybody. Okay.
Oh,
Now
is it?
I did not go and check how many of the people who were commenting over there were essentially like how many of them were like NRIs or some shit like that. But if you go to her other
Mhm.
posts, then I spent exactly 1 hour, and I'm ashamed of it, but I did, and I don't follow her on anything, but I spent an hour just trying to figure out what this whole thing is all about. And on the posts where she says that you cannot be using Indian symbols and stuff like that without knowing them and all that stuff, you would see comments by, again, these diaspora Indians like Monica Dogra and all, right? Like, yes, I think about this so much, and like I agree, and I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, chill the fuck
You're not
out.
giving any respect to the culture just because you
Yeah,
use a
exactly.
trident as whatever.
Yeah.
So
So it's one of those things, and you know why they're doing it. You know why they're doing it because obviously it builds a brand. And anybody who
Hmm.
sort of understands like the first thing about branding uh,
Hmm.
will say that, the whole idea is to sort of radicalize or polarize your target market and say, I am an American Indian who really believes in the Indian cause. I'm going to live in America forever. I'm never really going to come down and live in Hyderabad or or Vidarbha or any of those places, right?
Most of them are from Hyderabad, actually. I don't know why. They're from AP. But yeah, all the
So
engineers.
they will never do that, but the path that they will obviously do, the path that they will take is obviously the path of criticizing anybody who even likes Indian culture and uh, tries to emulate it by wearing the clothes or by singing the songs or whatever. Everything is cultural appropriation. It's just kind of dumb. It's just like one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. So
I don't
yeah,
understand that. I don't know why like the Indian diaspora outside of India, they're more desi than us, yeah, in a way. It's just so. My guess would be the fact that most of them are probably first generation, second generation immigrants, so to speak, right? And most of them right now, at least, would probably be the generation that is naturalized by way of birth, at least in these kind of countries. Their sense of insecurity from a cultural identity point of view would be quite insane in a melting pot like, say, America or maybe even Canada now, the way it's evolving. So I'm not going to call out UK because that's practically South Asian now, right? But in the US, and maybe Canada to some extent, where this kind of narrative is very very strong, very very prevalent. This kind of branding, these kind of cults that are coming up, the way they denounce how we use our symbols and motifs, and it's really nobody's business, right? It's we are free to do whatever we want with these things. I think it's more of a chest thumping, protectionist, hunkering down. It sort of cements their identity in that chaotic, multicultural
I
kind of
was going
a
to say the
society. I
same
think
thing. It makes them stand out, right? Like, what are you going to do?
it makes them stand out, and they themselves feel like they belong to something, some cause, in a land where they're kind of born confused, right? That the whole stereotype of American born confused Desi was a big syndrome in the 90s. And to some extent, that probably is still prevalent. And, you know, just think about this. I mean, there are certain movements like ISKCON, which is way more popular in the US than in India. I mean, in India, you have multiple movements like this. ISKCON is just one of them. But in the US, they are extremely popular. Why is that? I don't understand why that is. But see, the thing is, I think these this kind of a diaspora, right, which exists outside the country, they somewhat share the same 1800s, 1900s white man's view of South Asia. The whole Orientalist kind of a framework, that worldview, where it's a very exotic
It's
kind
a
of
colorful
land and
culture. It's so old. Oh
colorful
my
culture
God,
and
it's so
everything.
old.
Yeah, so they buy into the narrative and then they feel threatened, and then they want to like sort of protect it, like they are the pallbearers of these symbols that exist in this land, completely disregarding 1.3 billion people who exist here who are protecting it or whatever. I mean, they are
We're
completely
living
immersed
it.
in that culture. They're living it. We are basically living it. I mean, no matter what religion you believe in and everything, come Eid, come Christmas, come whatever, come Diwali, you are going to be living it in some way or the other, whether you believe in that the religion or not, whether you believe in that those cultural celebrations, festivities or not, you're going to be living it. It's extremely. I think it's stupid. It doesn't do us justice. 1.3 billion Indians don't know how to protect their own culture. Is that what you're talking about? Just because you think that someone would have trident somewhere on the bracelet or something, and they're like, "That's you're not showing respect to the." How ridiculous is that? The very fact that a trident has actually traveled all the way across the seas into the US, the way it has itself is a mark of some strength. You don't have to protect anything. It's doing well on its own. The whole point of Hinduism, anyway, was in the sense that Hinduism, because the problem is it's like a cultural melting pot of in itself, right? When it comes to philosophies, it's just sort of this huge, massive amoeba which just sucks in all the philosophies. So you will have, if you want to bring in a Sufi element, you'll have it in Hinduism somewhere, some pocket somewhere in the country celebrate something that is an amalgamation of all these beliefs and stuff. Those people outside don't understand this about India, which is kind of weird. It really is kind of weird. No, and no one's really chest thumping about Indian Buddhism outside. I don't know why. Or Jainism, and it's not that prevalent. It's just Shiva. Shiva के बारे में कुछ बोला तो मतलब
Yeah,
stupid.
yeah.
It's
That's
really
that's
stupid. I think this Kamya girl also is probably having the same Orientalist, exotic, oh, I'm from this culture, and it's my duty to protect it. And sort of lends her identity amongst various other identities. And the thing is, in the Western world, it's not just religious and cultural identities, right? It's also the racial identity. It's a multiple other elements that in India we probably don't discuss beyond casteism, beyond
That pretty much
casual
does it for
casteism. We
us,
don't
right?
really
Yeah.
discuss.
That
Yeah,
pretty much does it
beyond
for
casual.
us. I was like,
It's it's
"Kaun jaat ke
it's
ho,
low
beta?"
key and
Ah.
we're living it. So
It's like you go 5 kilometers outside the city. "Kaun jaat ke ho?" Like depending on that, you'll get your tea in either in a glass cup or
yes, exactly.
that's crazy, man. That's just fucked up. And
It's weird, actually. I'll tell you this anecdote. I think I've shared with you, but I'd like to share it on the podcast also. Like, it's really crazy. This the way casteism is just sort of it's I don't know. It just takes up this mind frame, right? It's a cultural mind. It's so well entrenched. When I was doing sales in Rajasthan, I was invited to my sales officer's house for some chai. Okay, and his family was there. I sat down. The minute I put my back down, his mother comes in and she gives me some water. And just before she's giving me water, she asked me, "How are you? Are you fine? Kaise ho beta?" and all that stuff. Then Brahman, no? Okay. I was like, "Huh, Brahman, no? Acha, acha." And then I got chai, I was served chai and everything, and it was a nice evening, and I left and everything. Next day, the sales officer was like, "See, because you're a Brahmin, you were given special treatment in my house," and he happened to be a Rajput in Rajasthan.
that is
What are the odds of that?
that is
So anyway, so he
that
was
is
like,
crazy.
he was like, apparently I was served in like special cutlery.
You did not know about
I
this,
mean,
did you?
I had no idea. How do I know?
And you
I
did
was
not
like, I
think
was
about it before that. Like there were no apparent other signs that like these guys are
no,
giving
not
you a
really.
preferential treatment.
No. Actually, this see in Bombay when we were raised, right? Largely, at least, we were sort of insulated, even in terms of politics. Like student politics is not very big in Bombay.
It's not.
It's a little chill. You just worried about that local which will leave at like 10:25. If you don't make that, you will not make class. And it's sweaty, it's hot, monsoons, what have you. Bomb blasts those days. It was pretty bad in Bombay, right? And no one really talks about these kind
Airoli
of things. But the
represent.
minute, really, yeah, minute of silence for that. But anyway, so but yeah, I mean those trains from Thane to Airoli, shitty places like hard life and everything. No one really talks about these things unless you go further up into Thane or maybe you're really like involved in politics for some odd reason. The minute I left Bombay, I went to UP. I went to the north especially. It is man, it's in your face. They just ask you on your face like, "Are you a Brahmin?" And I found it so odd. Like I didn't ask them back. Like, "What are you?" I didn't ask them back because it just didn't come naturally to me, right? It's so weird. Even in the south, I mean, it's in the south. So in the north, you will find like if you're a Brahmin, they have special love for you for some reason. But if you go to Tamil Nadu and you say you're a Brahmin, there'll be some contempt at the very least.
Oh, really?
It's very strange. So yeah. I mean, Tamil Nadu that's the whole reason DMK came up, right? In Tamil Nadu. I mean, it was on the back of the 60s when Karunanidhi started not Karunanidhi, there was someone else before him, but he was sort of like the protege, I think, and he took up the cause of DMK. DMK in Tamil means Dravida Munitran something something, which basically means the Dravid Progressive Alliance or something like that. Okay. And it was built on the back of an anti-Brahmin kind of a pro-Dravidian anti-Brahmin narrative.
I want to look this up. What is DMK? The full form is.
Yeah, Dravid.
Go on.
Please don't pronounce it. I've already murdered it. We don't need a North Indian murdering Tamilian like pronunciation.
It's a Dravida Munitra Kazagam. No.
It's not even Kazim, it's Karagam. It's probably Karagam.
Okay.
I'm not rolling it right, but
Fuck.
Karagam.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so
Apologies
and
for
then
that.
and then
Yeah.
Jayalalitha comes. Now Jayalalitha again, the famous actor, I forget his name,
That's
MG Ganesan or something like that. One of those guys, they come and it becomes all India. Dravid Munitram
AIADMK.
Karagam.
Yeah.
So basically, both of them are like anti-Brahmin, pro-Dravid. That's how it started in the 60s, and then it sort of evolved into things. So there was a massive anti-Brahmin backlash in Tamil Nadu to some extent. So there's always some amount of contempt in the south for the Brahmins because they believe that or power struggles and stuff. But in the north, it's still like the Pandit ho aap,
So
that
North,
kind of.
I'll give you a very very interesting story about this. I don't know if I've ever told you, but my dad was in the sense my dad is still around, but he's retired now. So he was in the railways, and my dad used to be on the goods train. So goods train are the ones that have chalis dibba, and they go from like, like one part of the country to another, and more than once in a while these trains would stop in the middle of nowhere. And because these trains stop in the middle of nowhere, I'm talking about middle of nowhere, which is the heartland of India, which is Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, places like these. So there are places
India's
like
Wild West. Huh?
India's Wild West, Dhanbad, there's Orchha, there is Lalitpur, there is Bina, there is Babina, there is Jhansi, there is Banda, all these places in North
Did you
India.
say Babina?
Yes.
Babina.
Yeah, Bina, Babina.
Okay.
Okay, there are two
Babina,
stations.
Babina.
Yeah.
Acha.
So these
Okay.
and a lot of these areas lie around the Chambal Ghati. And Chambal Ghati is obviously, like, for anybody, for the uninitiated, Chambal Ghati is where, like, Pan Singh Tomar is set in, and all these Dakuwala movies, even from the bygone era, are set in. So Chambal Ghati used to be this place where Indian bandits used to be, and to a large extent still live there. And there are these huge mounds where they have
I
made
think
their
when
houses.
Sholay was sort of like
It
Sholay also,
was
the whole idea of
supposed to
Gabbar
be
also was sort of modeled, right?
that, but not quite that. Like, Chambal Ghati has a very
Not
distinctive
quite that.
look. Yeah, a very distinctive look. It's literally like a badland. Okay, so in Sholay, at least you can see some kheti wadi happening. The Chambal is like a badland. That's
Mm-hmm.
what it looks like. And it's crazy out there. It used to be like a Wild West in a way. And I know there's a comedian called Agrimo Joshua who recently got rape threats because she made a joke, right? So she's from Uttar Pradesh, and she made a fantastic comparison on this. She said Uttar Pradesh is like the Texas of India. And I don't think she was too far off, because it was literally like one of those places. It is one of those places where outlaws can still sort of command that fear. Now, the story happened with my father. He was in my dad was a guard. So 40 डिब्बा छोड़ के एक डिब्बे में there is like the pilot, or the what do you want to call it, the driver of the train, along with his
Pilots.
co-driver. Yeah, there's a railway term called pilot
Are they
also.
called pilots though?
They're not called pilots,
Really?
but no, but there's a term in
Oh.
railways called pilots. I don't know what exactly it means though. However,
Oh, okay.
however,
my
my father is basically like 40 dibbas behind. And these trains, unless they get a signal, they cannot move ahead. So if your train is stopped in Chambal, it'll probably stop in Chambal for like 8 or 9 hours. Okay. Or sometimes for 2 days, or sometimes for a day. And I'm talking about the 70s and the 80s. Okay. So, and the early 90s to an extent. So that's how long these trains would stop. Now, back in the 90s, there used to be a really feared, one of the last outlaws of that area, called the Dua. The Dua was shot down, I think, some 15 years ago by the police. The Dua was like a proper bandit, like a savage, like a Pansing Tomar, but like more brutal in a way. And the Dua, my dad is sort of having his lunch in his dibba, and like it's like some time in the noon, and the Dua just walks in with his men, and he's in my dad's cabin in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Chambal, and he goes, गार्ड साहब अब एक काम कीजिए, हरी झंडी दिखा दीजिए और आगे वाले स्टेशन पे हमको छोड़ देना. And my dad is like, what the fuck? Like, because these guys have their guns and shit, right? They have the freaking like khanjar and this and everything, and it's crazy, right? However, he asked my father what's his full name is, right? And my dad actually like tells him that he's a Brahmin, right? Like you easily know that his
the
surname
minute
is
you hear the surname
Chaturvedi,
matches, there's
yeah,
some surname that
right?
give it away.
So you're a Brahmin. So he just started treating, like the most feared bandit of the time, started treating the guy he almost held hostage in, like, with a different sort of reverence. He's like, okay, then don't worry, we will not bother you too much. You can sit and you just drop us over there, don't worry about it. And all his men also became really polite. And I was like, this is just fucked up, right? Like, this is fucked up. I mean, that's just like one story. Imagine being a freaking a guy with name like uh, Atif Mohammed or some stuff like that. Dude, these fuckers would fucking rip into you, right? I mean,
God.
for every time these idiots say things like Hinduphobia and all, I'm like, boss, you have to understand how good we have it, and it's unbelievable how it's still carried out in parts of this country. And this is just one example, man. I mean, these guys were like, the bandits in North India were known to be nice to the Brahmins and all. So like even through the outlaws, you got a preferential treatment.
That's
And for me,
insane,
that's
right?
just insane.
That's
It is.
basically you're like you're God almost, right?
Yeah, you're almost
You
a
have
god.
the passivity of God in their eyes, and it's still carried to this day. I'm 100% sure to this day that that thing still exists.
Of course it
That
exists.
casual, we
Yeah,
call it casual custom, it's actually not that casual. So I'm wondering if Wandering Kamya knows about this bit, and she wonders if there's Hinduphobia right now
if Wandering
because
Kamya knows
if
something called
if ever
Chambal
Hindu,
exists.
yeah, and through this example, we just know that like if ever Hinduism was at its peak in the last 100 years, this is probably the period. And there's no Hinduphobia anywhere in India, so there's no
It-
point crying about this right
Dude,
now.
is the
I mean,
most
if it,
random shit ever. And there are more
it's
stories.
like,
Like,
yeah,
I mean, there are multiple stories, and I'll like, sort of keep coming up with them. I guess every time I, like
as and when it come up,
like
yeah.
every time something triggers that sort of story, it's fantastic. I mean, look up the guy. His name was
Just
Dadua. Yeah,
Dadua.
yeah,
Should I do it
Dadua.
right now?
Like
One sec.
no, but like one of the most badass names of all time.
Dadua.
Dadua
Oh
Daku.
Jesus. Shiv Kumar Patel, also known as, he has a Wikipedia page, dude. Chitrakut. He died in Chitrakut. Shiv Kumar Patel, also known as Dadua, was a notorious dacoit. Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. Yeah, the
See, there's a
Jesus.
border. That's where these trains are like mostly stuck.
Yeah, Karvi. Karvi is a place, is it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dude, this
So
is insane.
yeah, these. I mean, the most famous of all these Dakus was a Daku called Daku Man Singh, who again was one of the most famous bandits of North India. And Chitrakoot, by the way, has like like a special place in the history, because Chitrakoot, I think, is the place where one of your big poets comes from. Tulsidas, I think, is from Chitrakoot, if I'm not mistaken.
Tulsidas is from, oh, that's interesting.
There
I was
is a
actually
there is
reading
a there
about
is a there is a there is a saying there's a saying in Hindi. It goes this way, unless I'm massacring it, but I think I चित्रकूट के घाट पर लगी संतन की भीड़ तुलसीदास टीका करे चंदन घिसे रघुबीर. So it literally talks about the
Wow.
ceremony where Tulsidas is doing it, right? And it's on Chitrakoot ka ghat. So it's just it's a crazy land. It's a crazy place to be
It's
in.
yeah, it's just it's like, for us there was no gold rush. There was just alluvial plains, and there were
Precisely.
farmlands and land
Yes.
basically, and that place is where everyone just landed up, and crazy amount of minerals, and like you have coal, you have, I don't know what all you have. Like it's insane. That area is so rich. It was only natural that it would become the Wild West, right? It still is in so many ways, I'm sure. Though I'm sure, I mean, in 20, 30 years it'll improve, but I don't think people will still be confident to just travel through the hinterland. I don't know.
They,
I don't know if that there was a
no.
feeling like when I was a kid, we went to Bodh Gaya. Now I remember there was a certain amount of apprehension when we traveled from Patna to Bodh Gaya. It was a brutal 9 hour drive, even though it was like hardly any distance. And there was a fear, like, will it be safe? We have to like leave at like 6 o'clock in the morning so that we make it at least by sundown. We can't be traveling at night and stuff like that. I don't know if that kind of fear still exists in UP, Bihar, and all that. I don't know. Not sure.
It does. It does. It does. Remember, we were
It still
talking
does.
about the kabutre in the first podcast, and
Okay, they're still active, right? They're
yeah,
still
yeah,
active.
definitely, they're definitely very active, and a lot of activities are definitely very, very prevalent in those parts of the country. They're
Yeah.
harsh areas. They're very, very rich in general, but they're also harsh, if you know what I mean. They're like
Mm,
sociologically they're pretty harsh, because I
yeah.
think it's got something to do with this sort of casteism. Obviously, the stratification is such that not everybody gets a share of the kind of resources generated. I mean, you know what I
Yeah.
mean. But
Yeah.
it's a very, very because once you, okay, here's the thing. Once you start traveling by road from from Madhya Pradesh, and then you go into Uttar Pradesh and you see a bit of Uttaranchal, and if you're traveling northwards and you realize like you're in that Gangetic plain, right, into Gangetic plain, and if you're traveling by bus or something, and if you sort of ignore the pollution, if you ignore the population, and if you ignore the the kind of shit show that goes on over in that area for some time, you'll also see how green that place actually is and how brilliant the land is, right? And how rich in general. And then you would think about all these barbers of the world and all these Nadir Shahs of the world, and all these fuckers who came to this country and sort of took away the stuff. I mean, obviously they did that because this was one of the richest lands there was. And I know you and I have discussed about this, because you look at the place and you're like, oh, imagine this place 1000 years ago. Imagine this place 600 years ago. It would have been green as
Fucking pristine.
fuck. Yeah, it's pristine. It's got the
Insane.
Ganga River, which is not polluted by the factories
And
and
all
all.
these invaders come from these lands
Like
where
Uzbekistan and
none
all.
of it
Yeah.
exists. Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, it's like dry deserts. I mean,
They
it's like
fucking eat
cold
ice
as
and
fuck.
rocks in Uzbekistan for all I know. It's like, I don't know, man. They eat
It's crazy.
pomegranates and that's pretty much it. But I mean, of course, you look at that land and you're like, of course, that's a bountiful place. I'm gonna go and invade it. I mean, that's the reason
And
the
they settled in those
they
plains. I
settle in
mean,
those places. That's the reason I think Native Americans were not, going to the European borders and saying, "Fuck you, we want to take all your land," because there is no land to take. We already have our land, which is beautiful and pristine and
yeah.
bountiful, right? The same
Yeah.
analogy applies over here, because you have your North India, which is just, and it is a beautiful part of the world. It's one of the more beautiful parts of the world, actually, once you get rid of the politics and everything aside.
You take away the like a weird
Humans.
smoke screen. Once you take away all the
Yeah,
shitty people
you take a bus from there's a place called Majnu Ka Tila in Delhi. You take a bus from Majnu Ka Tila to Manali, which is like an overnight journey or sometimes like a day journey, and you start seeing the landscape change. But what you see the most is like the trees, the landmass, which is just full of farms and great rivers, and like the
It's
Beas
amazing.
River and all. It's just fucking beautiful, man. So, I mean, which is just very strange for me how we have led to this decline of that part of the world, which is just like how incompetent do you have to be, or how much exploitation there has to be done for that part to go from, like, why else would like a fucking Akbar or any other king would live there, or why would a why would a Chandragupta, like, long time ago, 2300 years ago or 400 years ago, would want to go to Magadha of all the places to sort of establish a kingdom. These places were freaking heavens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it
I mean,
takes a bit of British,
even
it
the
takes a bit of,
Pandavas fought over Patliputra, right?
I'm not sure. They fought in
Hmm.
Kurukshetra, which is
They fought
again
over
something,
Kurukshetra.
which is something you see on the way to on your way to Manali. Okay,
Hmm.
but for me, it's just like, okay, so how much did we get fucked by the British, and how much things got fucked after the independence by the people over here itself, to sort of take their place from one of the most prosperous regions in the world to like a ruin. I mean, it's just like bad right now.
I mean, we got fucked because we got plundered, but we got plundered even socio-culturally by the British and everyone, right? And that's like a nice segue to go back to Kamya.
Yeah,
It's that whole because the Britishers, what they did was, I think we explored in one of our video essays. It was the power of names.
oh yeah, one of the first
Um,
ones. Yeah.
yeah, for those that are listening, you should check out our video essay channel, Culture Minus Sanskar on YouTube. There's a video called Power of Names in which we actually explored how the Britishers, in order to gain control of our cultural mind, they thought of destabilizing it and distancing it from us in many ways. And one of the ways they did that was to adopt a certain Orientalist view towards our culture, which is also in a way inspired. I'm assuming it has inspired even Kamya in many ways. They said, "Oh, this place is exotic, it's pristine and everything, but at the same time, it's heathen." And there were a lot of random interpretations. And in a larger sense, it was almost derogatory because though they were eventually written by Christian overlords of many ways in the intellectual world. So all these Orientalists like Max Muller and all these other intellectuals, if you read some of their work from the 1800s, 1900s, where they've actually documented our culture and our way of being, Indians or the Hindus, okay, have been they're literally labeled as dark-skinned buggers or heathens, basically the heathens. And heathens is actually it's an extremely derogatory term considering the context in which it was written those days, because the Christian worldview was that if you don't follow the word of God, you're basically an infidel in many ways, and you're basically you're a heretic in some sense, and you will never attain salvation. So that's the whole the worldview. In many ways, that actually what it did was it raised a certain, so their modus of education sort of raised a certain intellectual class in India, that started to look at our heathen culture as being something that is backward and regressive. That's and
At their
then I
own
think
people, basically, like the
at their own people, at their own
people
people,
who
yeah,
came up, so the idea of, so if I
yeah,
have to sort of understand it correctly, the people who came up started to look at the people who are their people as like the heathen class. So if I am
yeah, the
educated
heathen class.
now, if I am an educated man
Hmm.
now, educated Indian, I don't consider myself as one of the Indians anymore. I'm like, fuck those guys. I am more like a British guy.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. And the problem is they were also a cursed class in many ways because they were never really treated equally even by the
Oh,
what do
there
you
is a
say, by the British.
fantastic, not a fantastic, a very tragic actually story about this. Who was the founder of Aligarh University? Syed Ahmad Khan.
No idea.
And Syed Ahmad Khan's son,
Ah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
I forgot the gentleman's name. He was a civil servant during the. He was a civil servant during the British era, and during
Huh.
that era, what was his thing? What was his stick? Yeah, he came back from
And
England. No, he became a civil servant. He came back from England. No, he was a judge, and he came back to India. And when he came back, he was actually given different quarters, and he was not allowed to mingle with the British in the parties. So there were two things that happened. He was actually, if I'm getting this correct, he was actually disowned by his own people because obviously he had become British. He'd become more
mm,
British, and he was obviously mocked by the British because he was like a second grade officer, even though he had like done all these crazy things, passed the civil services exam, gone there, became a brilliant judge, but multiple times his judgments were revoked by judges who were white. Basically, there's no better word to put it. And eventually he did not commit suicide, but he sort of became a drunkard, like a brilliant guy sort of became a drunkard and was driven to, either he was driven to suicide or he sort of died because of some sort of alcohol poisoning at a very young age, I think like 40, 45 or something like that. And this is just one of the examples, and it's like for me a very very sobering indication of how these guys treated you if you were in their ranks.
yeah, something similar to what happened to Mahatma Gandhi, right?
Oh well, that's like a, yeah, but that dude,
Yeah,
what he did was he took the insult
yeah,
and he took it serious,
yeah,
like, I'm gonna fuck you guys up. I'm gonna fuck you up
yeah.
like proper, right? I'm gonna fuck you up Satyagraha style.
He was also pissed off that he was actually grouped with the blacks in a way. So he
Oh
was
yeah,
like, "We are
that's
different from
that's
the blacks."
yeah.
Instead
Gandhi
of
has like a very crazy legacy, and it's he was a doc, like he was running the during the Boer Wars, right? I think in 1898 or something. He was running these corps which were taking care of the Africans, the indigenous African tribes, which is the Zulu people, if I'm not mistaken. Uh,
there are a bunch of them. Zulu
yes,
might be one of them.
Zulus were one of them, and the British at the same time. So he was like, you know what? I'm gonna take care of you. I'm gonna take care of you medically, and I'm not gonna participate in this war. So like his uh, हिंदी में कहावत है ना, there is like पूत के पांव पालना में दिखाई देते हैं. It literally means that like when your son is in the cradle, you get to know how he's going to behave when he grows up. So you could see Gandhi's
Mm,
so there was his political cradle, so to speak. And
mm, mm, mm.
and as he grew up, he sort of took that policy. I'm going to take everybody with me, and I'm going to move ahead uh, in an inclusive way, so to speak, as long as it's not blacks.
Blacks and a couple of others also he had a problem with. Basically, he was like, "We are not indentured laborers, and Indians are better." Basically, that was his thing, if I remember correctly. But yeah, are you going to subscribe to Wandering Kami? Want to follow her? I think I'm going to follow her. It's interesting. It's a character.
It's a character for sure,
She
man.
might have
It's
another breakdown.
There's another guy on Instagram who's again whom we already follow. I think his name is Guru Zorba. Check him out.
Guru Zorba. Acha. No, I'll check him out. I'll
That
check
was
him
like
out. I
another
haven't seen.
character. Okay, he's got a thing going on. He says and like every image that he puts out, right, has the same caption. Which is when he was 22 years old, Guru Zorba came to India from Canada on a study mission, and what is it? and decided that he wanted to stay back and search for enlightenment. Then he climbed the big mountain and met some guru, and since then he's been helping others to gain enlightenment, some shit like that. And this dude is like a crazy and wacky looking dude. Okay, he's got this pagdi, but he's also got this like bling under that, and he's got like a three, he's wearing like a jacket, like a very crazy camel colored jacket. And 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 mostly the comments are from Indians like, hey guru, setting la ke dena mera. And guru's like, please DM me. So which is like crazy. It's just unbelievable. And
Oh, man, I like these characters, dude.
yeah, he's got this crazy pagdi, which has got some diamond or some shit like that encrusted in it. And yeah, man, like those and again a Canadian who's now sort of residing in India or some shit like that, right? So
It's come back.
yeah. So we are back to these
Actually, if
characters.
there are a couple of Western intellectuals who went from India or the South, I mean the subcontinent, and they did a lot of good work. Actually, there's this guy called Ananda Kumar Swamy. In the 1900s, he was, I think, a Tamilian, or was he a Sri Lankan Tamil? He actually he was based out of Boston. He was managing, I think, a museum or something there, and he used to write these crazy essays about Indian culture, symbolism, the stories behind them. Like he has a fantastic piece on the dancing Shiva, of how, if ever there was a perfect symbol that explains all of creation and all of its mysteries in one finite form, it is the symbol of Nataraj dancing on the demon called Apasmara.
Oh really?
So it's a fantastic essay. I think it's some 15 pages or something. He's a crazy dude. He's one of these. He probably set the base for Indology in some sense, and he gave it some respect because it wasn't coming from a Christian bias kind of or coming from the white man's perspective. He was one of us. He just went abroad. He studied. He studied in their system. He adopted their worldview, and he presented to them what he basically lived like us in India or in Sri Lanka, wherever. So he was like a crazy dude. He was he wrote a bunch of he wrote a bunch of essays when he was with his, I think, French Canadian wife, second wife, and they were on a boat in Dal Lake, and she was researching something about Mughal architecture and paintings and stuff. It's a crazy story, but he has some amazing literature on what Hindu culture is all about and symbolism and everything. And it's a very, you sort of understand that, okay, every symbol, every motive sort of has a reason. Everything has a reason, and he would be one of the few Western sort of intellectuals, at least, who I would listen, and I can read and I can be like, okay, there is some objective, unbiased kind of opinions here. And I think he also inspired the likes of Aldous Huxley and many other intellectuals who sort of took on this new, like, reverential kind of an outlook to
And more sincere.
Orientalism or the South Asian. Hmm?
And more
More
sincere.
sincere, much more sincere, more. So they were like, you know what, these guys had it. They knew what was coming, or they knew they had figured something out. It's just that the previous guys like Max Miller and the like, they couldn't understand it. But with Ananda Kumar Swamy and a lot of these other such intellectuals, right, they presented a certain view that was sort of easy for the Westerners to also understand, that because there's a lot of complexity in our culture, right? There's so much
Even
complexity
we
that
don't get
the
it.
different visual languages, even we don't get so many things. Like it's crazily layered. I don't know, it's so crazily layered. But a lot of them have actually demystified a lot of this for the Westerners, and in many ways, it also, I'm assuming that even Joseph Campbell would have been sort of influenced by these kind of writings. Aldous Huxley has a beautiful monologue on how the dancing Shiva actually has influenced him, and I think in his book Island, he has gone deep into the symbolism behind the image of Nataraja, and he has, I think, 2 or 3 poems also dedicated to Shiva in the novel of his. It's very, very interesting. And Island also happens to be highly recommended by someone like Jordan Peterson.
Oh.
So it's really interesting because Island also has a lot of Buddhist elements in it, at least in the starting monologues, because it opens up to the surrealistic environment where A man is in the forest and the birds just shout out to him, "Pay attention, attention, attention." So it's an extremely philosophical novel. I think you should just read it. I would urge even the viewers to read it. It's something you don't read like in a span of 1 week. You sort of just blend into it, immerse in it. Take your time. Take your time because it's fantastic. So Aldous Huxley was someone who was heavily influenced by Ananda Kumaraswamy, who also started this philosophical movement called perennialism. So it's quite complex. It also has
What
some
is it? What is it?
parallels with the Theosophist movement. I'm also still reading into it. So I think I'll just keep quiet because I'm not really 100% sure. I can read out to you from like Wikipedia, but I haven't internalized it to talk about it. So
Hmm.
I think I think some amount of eternalist kind of philosophies and hinging on eternity. So it's sort of what you would get with when you blend Vedantic philosophy with Theosophist doctrines, and then you have this weird blend of metaphysics that come out of it. But it's not that simple. Also, it's pretty interesting. It's called perennialism. So yeah, I mean these kind of guys, they have sort of and people like Radhakrishnan from India who have really brought about this a huge corpus of literature now that you can just dive into, and you know that okay, fine, now Indian culture is worth something. It's about something. It's not just heathenism. It's not just idolatry. It's not something that's blind, ritualisms, dogma. It's not like that. It's just there's insane amount of philosophy is just layered into symbols in the physical world for the normal layman and laywomen to understand, but it's fascinating. And
Have
then you have the Ramanujans who have evolved through the late 90s and stuff. So it's fantastic. So I wonder if Wandering Kamya has read these people, because then she would know that
have you which
Hinduism is safe in the face of Hinduphobia. Oh shit! But there's a decline, bro. There's probably like easily 1.1 billion across the world right now, and it's in decline. Sure. The way we breed.
you have touched upon symbols like twice, right? And have you ever had a chance to read Carl Jung on talking about symbols and symbology in general?
Yeah, I
Because he
mean,
was pretty
I have.
fascinated with the Indian symbols. I mean, honestly speaking, to be fair, I mean, he was fascinated with symbols from across the world, and India just happens to be
Hmm.
one of those ancient cultures which had just too many of them, and like he has a very very fantastic, I think, definition, unless I'm very mistaken. No, I'm not mistaken about this. I have a book somewhere over here. It's called Man and His Symbols by
Man
Sigmund
and
Freud.
symbols, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to my friend Yashlav who gave it to me on my on Secret Santa. So Man and His Symbols is basically, it starts with he distinguishes between signs and symbols, and he says sign is
Hmm.
something that you just start out and it's like a visual representation and nothing more. So it's just like a
Hmm.
visual element, and that's a sign, right? And it can mean
Hmm.
whatever you assign to it. Symbol, on the other hand, you cannot just assign a meaning to a symbol. Symbol has been around and it has the meaning ingrained in it, uh, which you don't really get to choose. Like you cannot just take a cross uh, and start a Hindu nationalist party. You know what I'm saying? You cannot ascribe a different meaning to a cross, right? Or you cannot just take like, for example, like the Nazi swastika, and
Hmm.
just go and start a humanitarian party, because you will know that there is a meaning ingrained in it. And uh, that's what he started off with, and I was like, that just really makes so much sense, which also means that there are so many symbols across the world, especially in India, and they all mean something very unique. And it's just very interesting to me how a lot of these symbols got their meaning, and how did these meanings come about over the course of like thousands and thousands of years, of generations. So that for me is really interesting. So I was wondering if you've read anything about it ever.
Yeah, I mean, I have read some amount of Carl Jung. I actually read that book also, Man and His Symbols. It has a lot of it has a lot of deep dive into dreams, because Jung was extremely fascinated with how dreams was the source. Our dreams are the source of so many um religious and spiritual symbols. and certain archetypical forms, images, narratives that sort of play out, right? And it's almost transferred from into our subconscious from the unconscious realm, right? That's basically the collective unconscious, which some intellectuals, like, I mean, even we have called it like the cultural mind or the dharmic mind or whatever you want to call it. That information repository sort of just permeates the people of each culture, and they, without them knowing it, they're actually replaying all these images and they're replaying all these archetypical stories in them. And when Jung started talking to people and he started asking them to describe their dreams, that's when he realized that there was like a lot of Christians, right? They were actually replaying a lot of these symbols and these stories and
Biblical
archetypal
ideas.
narratives,
Yeah, yeah.
biblical ideas in many ways, right?
And they were very
So
young,
it's a
like 7, 8 year
fascinating.
old kids.
Yeah, fascinating. And so that is also, so that, that is that it's almost parallel to perennialism, like I just hit upon a little bit. I just hinted on that philosophy in the sense that there are some eternal truths. Okay, there are some eternal symbols that have been encoded in us from time immemorial. It's, for instance, the idea of the snake. Snake is just one of these symbols. The idea of the serpent, rather. Now the serpent is also dangerous because, of course, of the venom that um, it can bite and transfer to our bodies. It's a symbol of death in many ways. It's also a symbol of the hidden unknown that can spring up on you in your garden, right? That's one of the elements. But the
It's
snake is also
also
revered.
it's also a phallic symbol actually.
The snake could be also a phallic symbol, yeah, in many ways. Yes, yes,
I had a
yeah.
crazy
Especially
dream
the
last
coil
night.
snake, yeah.
I had a
You did?
crazy, yeah. In fact, this morning I'll show you my Google history, man. The first thing I did after waking up this morning was I looked up what is it to see a python in your dream. I saw two
What's that?
pythons, yellow, like sharp yellow colored pythons, both of them, one devouring the other on the side of a road. And like in the dream, I was just cycling, and
Huh.
I was seeing. I was like, "What is that? What is that?" The closer I went, I saw two pythons, and then one started devouring the other, and it's like swallowing like pythons do, right? And it was like sharp yellow. Like I have that thing just sort of etched into my mind right now.
Probably an albino kind of
Maybe,
python.
yeah, maybe one of those, right? And I have no
Huh.
clue what that means, because if you just go and do a simple Google search, that doesn't give you shit, because they'll tell you all sorts of nonsense like yellow is the color associated with this, so this is what it means. I'm like, no,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't mean that. That's bullshit.
This,
But
yeah. You can't. You need someone like a Jung to decode it. Someone like a Jung in probably the Indian context to decode it for you, because you are in this current dharmic cultural mind, right? You're enmeshed in it in many ways.
yeah,
But
I guess.
the serpent in the sense is like, the serpent in the sense is, it's dangerous. It represents the unknown. Could be a phallic symbol, like you said, but it also is extremely important when it comes to spiritual rebirth. The whole idea of how a serpent can shed its skin and take on another skin, in a way, it symbolizes growth, spiritual growth. It symbolizes liberation, salvation, many other things. So it's very interesting, these kind of symbols. And I mean, I don't even know how we can even get deeper into this topic without like bamboozling people right now. It's crazy because you have to like meditate on it for such a long time. Like I'll give you my personal story with symbols, at least of late, because I've been influenced a lot by Carl Jung in many ways, and I've also been influenced by at least the biblical lectures of Jordan Peterson, right?
Oh, they're
And
fucking brilliant.
yeah, it's insane. And you suddenly, I was educated for the longest time in a convent school, and we had an amazing church in it's Fatima High School. Shout out to Fatima High School, Vidya Vihar in Ghatkopar, Bombay. A really beautiful church, glass paintings. I can never forget the
Next
whole
to Don
aura.
Bosco College. Yeah.
Is it next to Don Bosco College?
Yeah.
No, no.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yes, yes,
Of
yes. Oh, yeah,
course.
yeah. How can I forget? Oh, so close by. Yeah, Don Bosco College of Engineering. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, Vidya Vihar only, right?
Shout out to
Yeah,
Arvind. Yeah.
yeah. So shout out to everybody actually. Suneet, Arvind,
Yeah.
bunch of other people.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, but I never understood it. And I never understood. So I bought the Holy Bible. I tried reading it. I didn't understand. I couldn't get through Genesis. I was like, "Ye kya bol raha hai, matlab? What is this? I don't understand, right?" But then something. So then when I read the power of symbols through Jung, through Umberto Eco, who happens to be a symbologist in many ways. He's a semiotician. Okay, he's actually an academic, but he writes his fantastic novels. Through all their work and through even some amount of MBA where I deep dive into anthropology and stuff like that, I just started to realize that the whole symbol of Christ, the symbol of the cross, these are extremely powerful individualistic motivators, man. Like if you can understand that, right, you can get yourself out of some really tough shit. And it has helped me personally, at least, to tide over some dark times.
Give me an example
And
if you will.
see, the thing is, okay. So one example is, so there was obviously a fallout. Let's just call it a fallout because I don't want to go too much into my private life. But there was a fallout of types, and it basically fucked my mind over. Okay, I was pretty much in the dumps, and there was no silver lining anywhere. Okay, and I'm talking about months. I'm not even talking like days and stuff. I'm not talking about depression and stuff because that is something that I've learned to like cope with and stuff. It's not that big a deal. A lot of people make it a big deal. It's not, but it is a big deal if you're like if depression is a problem, especially if you're medically proven, clinically proven, and if you don't have a support system. So if again, I would like to take back that statement because it might come across a little insensitive because I understand the problem and I know people who actually suffer from depression. If you have a problem, please reach out to people. Please reach out to like people who will understand you, not who will give you suggestions and solutions. Just reach out to people who will understand and be with you. Okay, so anyway, so these dark times were an external stimuli. It wasn't something internal that I could cope with. Okay, and the thing is the power of the symbol of Christ, right? This is my kind of an interpretation. I'm not sure if it's accurate from a Christian theological point of view, but the whole point of Christ coming down to earth uh, through the agency of God, okay, him taking on this act of taking on of embodying a mortal soul with limited time, knowing fully well that he is going to go through suffering just to sort of help others out of compassion and sort of become a symbol and a message in himself. That's why the blood of Christ, the whole physicality of Christ is so important in Christian theology. That from an individualistic point of view, it's actually it's quite inspiring for me. It's very strange. And and the symbol of the Christ, right, when he actually gave himself up in many ways, he's almost like a Socrates, right? He gave himself up willingly in spite of his followers you know pleading with him, telling him like, you don't have to do this. He willingly does it. Socrates also was he had an escape route, but he was basically castigated for influencing youth in a wrong way, immoral influence on the youth, right, through his teachings and stuff. But Socrates chooses to make a sacrifice out of himself. He chooses to be that sacrificial symbol for uh, philosophy in many ways. Similarly, for Christ, he's this sacrificial lamb, right? He willingly takes on this suffering. He willingly bears his own cross. Like he willingly carries the cross, which he knows is going to be the tool of his crucifixion eventually. He knows he's going to be nailed to it. He knows he's going to be tortured. He still walks with it, bears its burden, and eventually he dies on the cross. Right? It's something that is extremely uplifting from an individualistic, motivational point of view, in the sense that you have to bear your own cross. And ultimately, no matter what kind of a situation you're in, you may be in it because of others. You may very well be in it because of you, yourself, you and your stupid actions. But ultimately, if you want to get out of it, you will have to make the first move. You will have to bear your own cross and get out of, go through your crucifixion in many ways, and then sort of embody the serpent and come out in a different way.
That's the idea of the
Yeah,
hero also, right? You have to
yeah,
die.
yeah,
The
yeah.
phoenix
You
idea
should.
that you have to die and then be reborn.
Death and rebirth in many ways. Yeah.
Every every
So that's
every
why
hero has
they
that.
keep calling for the second coming of Christ. That's one of the reasons they keep calling for the second coming of Christ. I mean, this may not be accurate. If ever we have like the huge insane reach where like Christian theologists come in and they're like, "Kya bol raha hai?" Like, have you even internalized anything and stuff like that.
सर
But
बुरा
it's
मत
it's
मानो सर.
extremely powerful.
या सर प्यार से बोला सर बुरा मत मानो सर.
But I've actually come to like look at it in a different light, and it's another level of respect now. It's something that I've never understood as much, and I'm pretty sure a lot of Christians don't understand maybe. But then you need a shepherd, right? So you have the church, you have all of them to sort of come in. So the larger tenets of love, compassion, brotherhood, that's pretty strong. That's from a community point of view, it's pretty strong, which is also great. That's also great from a karmic point of view. But from an individualistic point of view, right? That if you want to get out of your shit, or if you want to do something good in life, or do something good and worthwhile in your life, the nothing is better than the symbol of the cross for me in many ways. Like I could just have a symbol of the cross boarded up on the wall in front of me. I don't have to look at anything else. I don't have to meditate on anything else. That's powerful enough. With or without Jesus Christ on it, it's not important. Similarly, you can have the swastik symbol. You can have multiple symbols. You can look at the dancing Shiva. It's insane because there's a ton of symbology behind the image of Shiva dancing on Apasmara. It's insane. It's and you can look at Aldous Huxley talking about it. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. So yeah, symbols. So again,
Symbols,
wondering what's her name?
Kamya.
Kamya. Hinduism is safe.
Hinduism is safe. Don't worry about that.
Everything is safe. We all good, bro. We all good, but you go golden. It's okay. Whatever floats your boat, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's entertaining at the very least.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, for sure. I guess. I mean, yeah, man.
There's so much inspiration to be taken from everywhere. So much inspiration.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you've sort of put me into a sort of a thinking mode, so to speak. Like I actually want to now sort of go deeper into this whole idea of symbology and the stories, like and I mean, it's just like
one example. Okay, one example. I think Apasmara is a demon who is being killed by Shiva in that symbol, right? He also represents memory in many ways.
He does?
Yeah, I think the etymology has something to do with Smaran, right?
Check it out. Let's do it.
Smaran is memory. Smaran is memory. So Apasmara, let me just, one second, I'll just tell you. Etymology. It's generally translated as ignorance. Okay. So negation of memory or recollection. So Apasmara is without, I think, or negation. Apa is without, and smara is memory.
Smaran is
so without
memory.
memory, yeah. So without negation of memory, so negation of ignorance. So I mean, there are many ways of looking at it, but it's insane. Like Shiva is defeating that, and then he's also surrounded by this halo of fire, which also symbolizes infinite and the finite together, and he's dancing his cosmic dance of death or the destruction, right? So he's destroying memory. So in many ways, that is also very analogous to the symbol of Christ for me, symbol of the cross for me, in the sense that you're reborn. Because I can again tie it up with the Nietzschean idea of how memory is the sole reason, the downfall of the human mind, in the sense that humans are bound to be suffering. They're bound to suffer because of memory, and that is what separates us from animals, right? You flog an animal, he will forget about it. But you flog us, we will retain that painful memory. We will retain that trauma. And that becomes a source of suffering because we're clinging to that, which is again a very Buddhist, Jaini, Hindu kind of philosophy.
Do you think Nietzsche was right about it though? Animals having no memory? Because
so like there was to a large extent, of course.
What about the experiment, the Pavlov dogs? Is that something based on memory or something else? I'm picking your brain, right?
It's that is what is it called? That is conditioning, right? That is conditioning. So I'm not sure conditioning has anything to do with memory. And when I talk about memory, right, I don't mean gross level memory. I'm talking about like situations, people, stuff like that. Like, so it's a thought. It's a thought. The fact that we use memories and memories help us cling on to the past, in many ways, it doesn't help us move forward.
Yeah.
And that's why. So you know what I mean. So if he's killing Apasmara, who's a demon of memory or a demon symbolizing ignorance, That's something to be reborn always. So it's like symbolizing life and death and the whole cycle and stuff like that. So it's crazy. When you think of it, it's like a whole world. We can just go on talking about it.
Yeah, man. In fact, there's one last point I would actually want to bring up before we try and see if we can wrap it up. Is I think it was one of these guys before Nietzsche. It was either Schopenhauer or was it Kierkegaard? I don't know. Who had a very similar idea, and I think that's where Nietzsche got the idea from. I think it's Schopenhauer, unless I'm mistaken. It's
Publish
yeah,
Schopenhauer, yeah.
yeah. He talks about how we are the first animals, probably the only animals to have consciousness, right? And what that does to us is obviously it gives us an imagination, and what we can imagine, one of the first things we can imagine is death. And so we are the only animals who actually know about our own death, who know about our own fate, because and I think one of Jorge Luis Borges's lines, I think, is all animals are immortal because
They don't
because
have a concept of time.
they
It's
don't have
eternal, right? Every
yeah
moment for them is eternal. Is that what it is?
yeah, they don't have an idea of death. When they're dead, they don't know it. Before that, they're always alive.
Yeah,
So
they're always
all
alive.
animal, yeah,
It's
it's a
instinct versus intellect, right?
yes. So it's a crazy idea. So when we and going back to Schopenhauer, I think again, unless I'm mistaken, but yeah, the idea stays the same. It's a very solid idea that we are the first people, probably the only species, at least when he wrote it, to understand that we will die. And when he says we'll die, that means we want to sort of, we're getting so scared of that idea that we want to be immortal. That need for immortality and the understanding that there is a death gives rise to something like an afterlife, because we create that afterlife. And that afterlife, the way we create it, obviously it has to adhere to the systems that we set on earth, which is your religion. And that is
Hmm.
why multiple religions fight with each other. One of the biggest reasons is because if your idea of afterlife is wrong, or
Yeah,
my
or
idea is
wrong.
wrong as compared to yours, that means I'm not getting an afterlife. If the Islamic idea versus Christian idea, if they're both differing, that means one of them is definitely not getting immortality.
Hmm.
And that's like a basic fundamental existential problem, right? I mean the problem with religion is not just that surface level shit, right? I mean, for you it's existential because now you're saying that if you are Christian and I'm Muslim, that means one of us is going to live forever, and I don't want it to be you, so I'm going to kill you
Hmm.
to prove
You
that.
can't take my place.
Yeah, and that means one of us is basically having an afterlife, and who's going to have the afterlife? Whoever's system right now on earth is better, like whoever's system is correct, rather not better but correct. So I'm going to try and fight that war with you just to prove that my religion is better than yours, so that I get that temporary like satisfaction that when I die I'm going to go up and I'm going to live forever, and this fucker is not. So fuck, I mean,
Insane, dude.
yeah, it's just mad for me. It's been like, it's a idea I heard for the first time. It just baffled me. I was like, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's the only reason, maybe there are 100 other reasons, but this idea just blew me away. I was like, what the fuck are this guys talking about? And yeah, so I mean, unless you wanna,
Scary.
yeah,
It's scary.
yeah. Oh, it's 8:30 already. You wanna
So
say
man,
bye
I
bye to people and
especially wondering Kamya, man, for
thank you, thank you,
being
thank
such
you,
a
wandering
and
Kamya.
amazing politician.
Thank you.
I want to follow you, wandering Kamya, in case you ever watch this video.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
one of them.
Yes, and we're gonna agree with everything you say. We're just gonna go and like that stuff. It's like,
For
it's all
sure.
beautiful.
So just
You're beautiful. You're amazing. You have the universe within you. I think that's one of our posts. You have a universe within you, and
was it?
the night and the day and everything is within you. Very, 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 very
All the
poetic.
gods, all the heavens, all the hells are within
I
you.
was coming to that. Very Joseph
Joseph
Campbellish, but yeah. So thank
Maybe
you,
she's
ladies and
enlightened.
gentlemen.
I don't know. Maybe she's
What?
enlightened. I want to follow. Maybe she's enlightened. I don't know. I have to follow her a little more and
Fuck
see
yeah,
what
I
she's
guess I
about.
take back my words. She's fantastic. Indian diaspora is amazing. It's the best thing to have ever happened to Indians.
Phobia is not going to win.
Hinduphobia, yeah. Hinduphobia is real, people, and everything that Kamya says is real. I agree with her, and please accept my friend request. Thank you very much, people, for tuning in tonight. And that's Sandeep. I'm Aakash. We are Culture Minus Sanskar. This is Culture Minus Sanskar Unscripted. We're going back, and we'll be back very soon Maybe we'll record one tomorrow, maybe sometime later this week. We also have got a few guests lined up for next 2 or 3 weeks. We'll be discussing stuff like India after independence. We want to discuss a bit of Maratha history and a bit of psychedelics if some of our friends agree to it. So thank you very much for tuning in once again. This is Aakash and Sandeep signing off. Bye bye. And I'm going to stop recording.